Everything I just complained about is dumb and doesn't matter. Every other Ice Age movie's a 10 out of 10 because it's the greatest character in all of cinema. The real reason I hate this movie is because it doesn't have Scrat or his acorn. What was Disney thinking?
Well, I can't believe it, but the Mad Lads actually brought Scrat back.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
I thought the Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild was the last we'd see of Ice Age, at least for a while. When I talked about it a couple weeks after its release, I ended my video jokingly insinuating that Scrat was the best part of the Ice Age franchise. I assumed that because he was absent from the recent entry, he would no longer be part of the franchise. But it appears my bluff has been called, and Ice Age has thawed out yet again. This time in the form of 6 animated short films starring Scrat himself. I watched them immediately after waking up on release day, morbidly curious as to how they fared against this travesty, with one question in mind. Can Scrat save the Ice Age franchise? To answer that question, we must dive in head first. Episode 1, Nuts About You. Yeah, be prepared for some hilarious episode titles. Scrat is shown in all his glory running around looking for a place to bury his nut. Wait. Scrat is shown to be up to his old antics running around with his beloved acorn. Until that is, he encounters a child, known only as Baby Scrat. Initially, Scrat ignores the baby, but over time develops an emotional connection to it. This is illustrated as his brain dividing its focus in half. He has some fun with them until they encounter his acorn. In this moment, the crux of all 6 shorts is born. Scrat tries to navigate his newfound connection to Baby Scrat and their newfound interest in the acorn. Scrat tries to wrestle it away from the baby, only to be physically abused. It's a simple premise, but not one that has no potential. Unfortunately though, this is where the problems form. The typical Scrat narrative is him trying to keep his acorn, meeting extreme difficulty along the way, and often getting injured. It's a formula that was consistent across 5 movies, multiple shorts, and over 20 years. Adding another element to that can absolutely make it more dynamic. In fact, Blue Sky has already explored the same narrative. In Ice Age 3, Scrat dealt with a similar issue, fighting with his attraction to Scratette, and both of their desires for the acorn. It's the exact same thing, except Baby Scrat is clearly designed to be as cute as possible. Personally, I don't find him very cute, but I'm also not the target demographic. My point is that this has been done already, so what additional stakes does the series present, or additional challenges that Scrat hasn't already dealt with? Unfortunately, very little. But, in the interest of fairness, I brushed a disappointing first short off as a potential slow start or a fluke. Perhaps now that the characters have been established, we can get to the meat and potatoes of the series. So, moving onward to episode 2, Lo-Fi Scrat Beats to Sleep/Chill to. In this outing, Scrat tries to steal the acorn from Baby Scrat while they sleep. They immediately wake up and nearly start an avalanche by screaming. Scrat tries a few things to both calm the baby and keep the acorn, none of which are successful until he bashes his head in frustration, which sounds like music. Another simple concept, Scrat has to play music by physically injuring himself to put Baby Scrat to sleep, hence the name. It's really not any better than the first episode, and this is when I realized what I was in for. Almost every single episode follows this formula, but in a way that's almost inherently uninteresting. Growing up occasionally seeing old cartoons like Looney Tunes and Tom and Jerry, and even some expansions of those ideas like Animaniacs, you come to notice a pattern in shows like this. Each segment or episode follows a very predictable pattern, but this is nonetheless entertaining because it doesn't rest on its laurels. Looney Tunes and Animaniacs in particular are good at reversing expectations and playing with the rules.
Wabbit season! Duck season! Fire!
This is what makes those shows funny, even when the formula has been established. They build a legacy and set of rules which is entertaining for a while, but when it starts to get stale, they change it up. That's why they're such icons of slapstick animation. Modern slapstick is built upon this principle. Because the rules have been so clearly established by decades of predecessors, they necessitate doing something different in order to distinguish themselves. The original Ice Age films did this by juxtaposing Scrat's misadventures with the journey of the herd. He was comic relief, not the main focus. Moreover, he often interacted with the main story or helped transition the plot. Removing that entirely changes the dynamic of Scrat, something that could work in his favor. However, ironically, it ends up being even more predictable in the end. After watching the second episode, I made a prediction about how every single one would go. Scrat and Baby Scrat would fight over the acorn, something would go wrong, it would momentarily bring the two together, and then the acorn would divide them. And I was right. Every single episode has this exact same structure, which leaves the whole series feeling a bit hollow. However, that doesn't mean the series is without merit. I was surprised by the fact that I found some of the visual humor pretty funny. The slapstick is usually a miss, but there's a lot of stuff that works pretty well. The 5th episode features the two playing with seesaw physics in order to fight over the acorn, and it's never consistent, which actually makes it more interesting. There's also this ridiculous looking cliff, and the sequence where the two team up to annihilate a bird. But then of course the episode ends with Scrat falling off a cliff. Still probably my second favorite episode overall, but it doesn't really hold a candle to its peers or predecessors. That being said, the 6th and final episode is legitimately really good. Introducing Nut the End. Scrat and Baby Scrat send the acorn flying off a cliff, and Baby Scrat pronounces it gone. In the aftermath, the two are unsure what to do, before realizing they still have each other. In a mirror of the first episode, they spend quality time together. But as time passes, Scrat goes old. Strangely, Baby Scrat doesn't really age though. There's some fun visual gags, and the two share a tender moment together before Scrat begins his journey to the next life. That's right, Scrat, who has been through an unbelievable amount of physical trauma, dies of old age after a happy life. It's actually pretty touching. His spirit leaves his body, but before he can ascend, he figures out that Baby Scrat played him like a fiddle. The death of the acorn was just a ruse, and Baby Scrat was waiting for him to die so they could eventually have the acorn to themselves. In his rage, Scrat forces himself back into his body, once again on the chase and terrifying Baby Scrat. This is unironically a really funny concept that's executed pretty well. It's far less predictable than the other episodes, even if you could see it coming. On top of that, the stakes are higher, which makes the payoff better. It got me thinking about how all this energy could have been carried into the rest of the shorts. The reason they all blend together is because it's 6 variations of the same idea we've done before. Instead of doing it this way, they could have taken some of their favorite episode ideas and strung them together into one short. That way it only follows the story outline once, but still features fun visual gags and slapstick. Here's my proposal. Scrat encounters Baby Scrat, he has the internal conflict, and the two spend time together before going on a big chase that leads them on a journey through the other episode concepts, before finally resulting in the acorn being lost in this cave, or seemingly destroyed. Depending on which route you take, Baby Scrat either finds out about the acorn, or enacts the same plan as before. Either way, the rest of episode 6 plays out in the exact same way, just now being at the end of a short film. It's the same payoff, but with better build-up and the added bonus of narrative cohesion. Instead, each episode is the exact same thing, playing out like a Tom and Jerry cartoon but a lot shorter, and unfortunately, less creative due to environment or time/character restrictions. Let's compare this to the structure of some other examples of modern slapstick animation. For the purposes of this comparison, I chose 2 similar Incredibles short films. Jack Jack Attack follows a simple formula like Scrat Tales. During the events of The Incredibles, a babysitter is hired to look after the youngest in the superhero family, but no one knows he has powers. The comedy comes from a regular person trying to deal with a superhero baby, and Pixar did a lot of playing with powers. There's enough time for the short to have a plot and structure, but it's manic and fast-paced enough to still have effective physical comedy. Auntie Edna is actually extremely similar. It's got the same basic structure, but this time features the best character in The Incredibles, Edna Mode. She's a bit better prepared for the baby's shenanigans than a teenager, but ends up being overwhelmed by the creative use of powers. Once again, it has the through line to tie everything together. Despite being similar, they showcase different powers, feature different characters, and are resolved in different ways. Auntie Edna was clearly inspired by Jack Jack Attack, but it's expanded and unique. And they aren't just 3 minutes long, which allows for more build-up and satisfaction. My point in describing this is to illustrate why I think my previous idea would have worked much better. If it were 1 or even 2 shorts with combined ideas, the formula wouldn't have felt as stale. Pixar intentionally created an atmosphere with really solid comedic potential, arguably more than Ice Age could ever offer. And on top of that, they offered a great structure for a story. It may be a little unfair to compare, but I believe there's still some potential if you just restructured. In summary, my expectations for Scrat Tales were pretty low, and I was largely right. The animation is a huge upgrade compared to Buck Wild, but it feels jittery and less fluid than it should. The slapstick is not unenjoyable, but largely nothing special. Its greatest strength is the bizarre final episode, and would benefit from being 1 or 2 shorts as opposed to a collection of 6. The Incredibles shorts proved that you can do a formula well as long as you mix things up. On the day this series was released to Disney+, a video titled The End surfaced. It's just a small, 34-second YouTube video, but it's honestly really powerful. It's simple but elegant. Scrat finally eats the acorn and scampers away. After over 20 years, it's finally over. I can't think of a better send-off for the first character shown in one of Blue Sky's films. Maybe I'm reading into it a bit too much, but I think it's absolute perfection. So, to answer the question, can Scrat save Ice Age? It's a bit more complicated than I initially thought. The show on Disney Plus isn't great, save for a few moments and sequences, but this clip is a bittersweet send-off that I didn't expect to see. And if Ice Age Collision Course, Buck Wild, or Scrat Tales didn't mark the end, in my eyes, this did. Sure, Disney may try to resurrect it and keep making money until the end of time, but in my eyes, Blue Sky got the last laugh. They ended where they began, giving a conclusive ending, and in the process, saving the franchise. So for me, the answer is yes. Scrat did save Ice Age. If you saw Scrat Tales, let me know. I'm genuinely curious to see how others felt about it. Even if you didn't see it, do you agree with the idea that Scrat Tales could work better as one short film? Do you agree with my conclusion about Scrat? Leave a comment letting me know. But that's all I've got today though. Subscribe if you want, maybe share the video, and if you made it this far, tell me your dumbest joke about nuts, and if it's a good one, I'll heart your comment. Thanks for watching.
No, stop! What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?